When someone starts talking about short track racing legends, one of the names that is sure to come up is Marv Marzofka. And he was born and raised in Rudolph, Wisconsin, the same little town as Dick Trickle, my grandfather, Tom Reffner. We covered many moments about his racing career from the very first time he takes a car to go racing and then was sent home right away to go add more bars to his roll cage. But from that very first moment, that then spanned his racing career to around 25 years of racing, where he accumulated so many track championships, and I had no idea how many that he had actually had over his racing career, with just 10 of them having come from just Dells Raceway Park alone. And I had no idea that he had so many, just had one track prior to this interview. So that was really cool to learn about him and to talk about, winning, such a substantial amount of track championships. Just absolutely incredible. Then we go ahead and we talk about his family and his friendship with Dick Trickle and also with my grandpa, Tom Reffner. And we also talk about the building of the Trickle Memorial. I think the Trickle Memorial is something that is so incredibly special that honors Dick Trickle, but I think the other thing that goes along with the Trickle Memorial is it shows how so many people cared about, one person, but also just how great, the racing community is. There's so many people that came together to make that possible and to make that happen. And, behind the scenes and in it all, a lot of the events and fundraisers, Marv was one of those people who put in a lot of time and effort to make that happen. And it was cool to chat about that as well. Marv is someone that my grandfather spoke so highly of my entire life. And for me, it was truly an honor to be able to sit down with Marv and talk to him for, around 2 hours and, hear his incredible stories and life journey, and for me to really learn a lot about him. And, like I said, I learned a lot about him, and I hope this is a great opportunity for everyone else to learn about, so many other incredible things that Marv has done in his life. So let's get into it. Well, Marv, it's an absolute privilege and an honor to have you here and to have the opportunity and chance to ask you some questions about your life and about racing. And I think the first question I want to ask you is there something that was in the water back then that made all you guys so fast that grew up in Rudolph?
I don't think there was something in the water, but I think it was because us four guys were all friends, and we started on the same path. We started hunting together, and then, long before that, it was carts that we made.
Sure.
And then after that, Tom and I had motorcycles.
Okay.
Then I went to motorcycles, and then from motorcycles just cost money. It cost a lot of money to race a motorcycle or run a motorcycle. So we started with junk cars, and, God damn, we could make some money, too.
Yeah.
You get a $50 car and take it to the racetrack. If you were good enough, you could make money with it. So that's where it really began, the racing part. But before that, it was hunting and fishing and just hanging around.
Yeah, what was childhood like for you when you were youngins?
I hated the farm.
Okay. Grew up on a farm then?
I was born on the farm.
Okay.
And raised on the farm and hated it with cows. We always had too much work. It was always up in the morning and to bed at 10 o'clock if we got everything done.
Sure.
A lot of times in the summertime, everything didn't get done. It'd be waiting for you in the morning. So I just hated the farm. So, well, by the way, after hating the farm for so many years, I ended up buying it from my brothers and sisters.
Perfect.
Crazy. So all I do is have fun there now. I got deer and turkeys, and when I had my heart problems, I went there, and I had trails through the whole. I got trails through the whole thing, like 2 miles of trails or 2.5 miles. That was a lot easier walking there than it would be downtown or something.
Oh, sure.
So,
A little more peaceful, too.
so I enjoyed it from the time I got it. Still am, you know. So. But the farm, didn't like that. So I was looking for any way out of there. And Tom was working with my dad on the farm.
Okay. Didn't know that.
Dick worked across the field at Dudas, and I worked on the farm, and I and Tom and another friend of mine.
Now, was your parents' farm much bigger than like the farm that like my grandpa grew up on? I'm guessing so. If he was working over at your place,
It was like we had 3 farms.
Okay.
The home farm was 160, and the farm down the road was just even 100. And then we had a farm in Sherry, which was 180.
Okay.
So
That's a pretty good operation for back in those days.
it was way too much.
Yeah, I can understand why the work never ended.
So anyway, got out of there. So the first I could, and make money on my own, I bought a couple of cars, and junk cars, and junked them and made some money on it. And then one time I had bought like 40 of them. I'd go to all the farmers around that had a junk behind there, and they all did, and I bought them, and then I sold them to the scrap dealer. But that was a lot better than farming, though.
Were you doing that in high school times?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. I guess it was almost later high school. My dad had a heart attack when I was 16. So he couldn't do nothing. We were milking 68 at the time, but we had over 100 head. So I stayed home and worked.
Okay.
And needless to say, I got hurt during that time, and I missed some of the school, so I fell behind your grandpa a year, because otherwise it was from first grade, not first grade, I think it was third grade, second grade, all the way up through, but then I missed a year. I spent 3 months in a hospital or where I couldn't work because
Okay.
I had my a bad skull fracture and I had blood on the head.
Oh, no kidding. Okay.
So I that part I stayed home, but I didn't like to farm. Well, with all the stuff that I worked on there, I had a good idea how everything worked, and become a mechanic along the way. I stopped in to buy a car at one of the dealers downtown, and I had gotten a job in Point, but that's quite a ways to drive. When I stopped for a car, and the guy says, well, you know something about fixing cars, don't you? Oh, yeah. Sure, I did. He says, well, why don't you work here? And then you're only a couple blocks from where we are. Okay. So I started working there. And I stayed there for 44 years.
Okay.
So they were good to me. So that was my farming gone down the drain. But those go-karts we had, to figure mine out, I built a go-kart, used a motor off a whitewash sprayer that sprayed barns. Inside of the barns, you'd spray with white. I used the motor off on that, and I built the car. The only bad part of it is when you turn the steering wheel to the right, it turned to the left. And I couldn't get it right, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You know, you had to really concentrate.
Yeah, if it's turning the opposite way what you're thinking it should, yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah, it was good steering, but you go that way, I need to go that way. Well, it ended up, we had a neighbor that drove like a maniac and on them gravel roads, and I was going down a gravel road, and I'd get it going 50 miles an hour.
Okay, so I think it had a good motor then.
So, yeah, it was a big motor. It got to get over to next to the ditch, but I got all excited when he's getting closer and the gravel was flying and turned it the wrong way and run it into the other side of the ditch and smashed it all to hell. And that was the end of that one. That was the end of our fun on there. So we'll make one that's already got steering in it. Well, I bought one of those junk cars, and it would go like hell, a nice V8 motor in it. Well, my brother told me they were racing up at Stratford. We should go up there.
Okay. How many siblings did you have?
3 brothers and 3 sisters.
Okay. I didn't know your family was that large. Okay.
Yeah. And, okay. We had an old 4-inch welder on the farm and welded the roll cage in, but we didn't put enough in. We just had a bar over my head and braces to it.
Okay.
And we went to the racetrack with that, and they looked it over and sent me back home. Says bring it back when you get the rest of the roll cage done. You know.
Okay, so they didn't think you had enough in there.
So I had to go home.
And what were you towing it with?
Let's see.
It's always fascinating how people actually end up getting to the racetrack.
Well, it was a newer Pontiac with a V8 motor, and that right then, and we'd use 2 chains, one on the stock car, and put a tire in between them.
Okay.
And I sat in the car, and my friend pulled me. So Stratford was about 35 miles one way. So you better not crash.
Yeah.
You got to tow it home somehow. Well, that went on for a long time, and that was a Studebaker that I made, but it was a lot of fun with Tom and I and
So the first car was a Studebaker?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was a lot of fun. So the following year, Tom had a car and Dick had a car. Well, Dick tried driving in between there, driving for somebody, and he had an old Dodge. And these big old 48 Dodges were big on top and little on the bottom.
Okay.
The guy that owned it says, you're not going fast enough. You just go, he says, Dick says, it'll tip over if I go any faster.
Yeah.
He says, you got to go faster. So he went and tipped it over. It rolled. But anyway, that was the next class of cars we had, and worked on them until I used up all the Studebaker hubs in the country, because they had all cast iron stuff under them, and they'd break the wheels off and break the hubs off. Well, I guess that's my first front end work on it. I put a Buick front end under it.
Okay.
Well, that was good. It didn't break nothing then. But then I broke the engine, and I went to a little Fords. We had a lot of cars in that time. But all together, I mean, we always was to each other's place.
And actually, up until some of those times, kind of going back a little bit, were you and my grandpa and Dick, were you guys friends at a pretty young age, or when did you guys all kind of gravitate towards each other?
Third grade.
Okay, so pretty young. Okay, I never really knew, so I was curious.
Yeah, third grade. I think that's when your dad got here. It possibly could have been second grade.
Okay.
But we were buddies right now. I mean,
started causing trouble right off the get-go.
We got in trouble right off the bat. So, and all the way through school, it was all the time, right to the end. I could always rely on him, and he could always rely on me. If he wanted to know something that he knew or I knew, or, there was a good friendship there.
Yeah.
So it was a lot more fun because, we went to other racetracks in the circuit between here and Illinois and Minnesota. And in Minnesota, when I drove in there, they heard about me and stuff, and they said, one of their top drivers says, Marv, when you get done racing, don't take your helmet off. Okay. He says, because somebody will probably come and beat on you, So.
Oh, for going down there and winning, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I never got beat on, but it was a good gesture.
Yeah. So you put that Pontiac front end on the Studebaker?
The Buick front end.
Buick front end, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then how did you start doing when you were running up at Stratford?
I won the first race.
Okay.
As soon as I went back with a roll cage, I started out in front of the race, and behind me they had a Buick with a binder wheel on it, corn binder wheel. They used things like that to keep the radiator okay when they rolled over. And the track was pretty rough,
Okay.
It was rollovers every night. Okay,
really?
So, and this corn binder wheel would just, with that welded to the frame, it'd stay okay in there. So they had him lined up behind me, and I'll be damned if he was going to catch me.
Yeah.
Because that's what they did. If you got caught, you got passed one way or another. So it was pretty rough racing, but it was fun. I didn't like the dirt either, part of it. So as soon as the asphalt track started, I quit on the dirt.
Okay. I thought maybe after driving that go-kart and having to turn right to go left, you'd have been a natural on the dirt.
So,
What made it rough running up at Stratford? Was it just the way people drove in general?
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And
No one had really developed their racecraft at that point.
the cars were built for the pasture,
Okay.
And then they eventually blacktopped it. So
Okay.
most of it, some of it was dirt. But it was rough. It was really rough. By the end of the night, when it was dirt, there would be grooves in it, a foot and a half deep. So,
Oh, no kidding. Yeah.
so it was pretty easy to roll one over.
Dirt track prep wasn't the same back then as it is now.
No.
Yeah, I never really thought about that back then, having big ruts or anything like that. And gosh, that would make for some rough racing.
One of the friends that had a car there, he come in and he handed us a big stone. It was this big. He said that come through his side window. A stone in there that weighed 15 pounds.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't imagine that coming through a window.
Well, side window, it was open.
Yeah.
It was really rough.
So once you started migrating more, what was the next, track that you really went to that, was blacktop then?
Well, I believe there was so many right in a bunch of Black River. They went from their fair track, that was dirt,
Okay.
to a blacktop track. And that was quite early. I'd say maybe 62 or 63, somewhere along in there. And then all of a sudden they were all blacktop, Toma and North La Crosse and Madison, and they all went into it with their small. Madison was a quarter mile, and
Yep.
the Dells was a quarter mile.
Okay.
Black River was a small quarter mile, and then Tomahawk was a awful small quarter mile.
Sure.
And then it went from there, they stretched them out a little bit. So
Now, I know you'd mentioned kind of right away that, you could take a really cheap car and go make some money with it. What were you guys able to bring home a little bit of change when you're racing at Stratford then?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was, at the time I was making, at my job, after they took taxes out, I was making $38 a week.
Okay.
I had made $42 for winning that race. I thought, the hell was that working? I'm going to race.
Yeah, when you're able to make a little more doing that versus working, that's a good way to get you hooked.
Well, it really wasn't that way, but that's the way I thought.
Yeah.
You had a hard time making enough to keep everything going,
Sure.
good. And you usually spent everything you made on the race car or a better race car or a better motor. It's just the way it is.
Yep.
I think it's still that way.
Still that way. Still that way. Yeah, that was going to be my first comment. Like, well, that's it. It started out that way for you guys, and it's still going for everyone else today.
Yep. As long as we keep going, someday I'm going to make it, There's going to be bigger money, and we'll make something out of this. I never went broke doing it. Come pretty close one year. I had the Ford Torino in blew a few motors in there, and those motors, they didn't give them away. They were very expensive, so ended up at the end of the year pretty close to broke. But I think just about all racers have done that.
Yeah, you always have those tough times and those tough years that takes a little more than you'd like it to.
Yeah.
Once you guys started, other places started blacktopping. Where were some? How quickly did you go from racing from just one night a week to multiple nights a week?
When the tracks opened up, I went.
Okay.
So.
And if you had an extra chance, you were heading there.
It was Monday, Tuesday, it was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and twice on Sunday. So.
And I know people always talk about that you guys racing, that many times in a week, but how early did it really evolve into being able to do that, where you were able to race that many nights a week? Is that in the 60s, or did that take until the 70s?
Well, I'd say middle 70s.
Okay.
Or sort of early 70s.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I never really knew, how early in times you guys were able to start racing that many nights in a week.
Yeah, it was early 70s, I believe.
Okay.
So. I know my first class reunion was 25 years because I raced every weekend. So it was 25 years before I made a class reunion.
Okay. I haven't made one yet either, so.
You can't go to that if you could race somewhere, so that's for sure.
Right. And then, you're talking about that Studebaker. What was your next car after that? When did you guys?
It was a Ford Flathead.
Ford Flathead, okay.
I won my first feature with a Ford Flathead.
Okay.
And the track was blacktop, and there was quite a few 55 Chevys and V8s around when I did that. The old flag man up there, Sonny Emmerfold it was, he says, Marv, you're really running. You started on pole, you got a good chance of winning. Yeah, you betcha I do. I said, no way. But it started out, and I was making time lapse the whole time, and ended up winning with Marlon Walbeck right alongside of me.
Okay.
One more lap, I won to one. That was my first one. I was pretty happy with that, too.
Yeah.
So there wasn't too many flatheads winning anymore. From then I went to driving Chevy for Chevy Garage at Black River.
Okay.
So.
Where was the first track you ended up getting a championship at?
The first championship track, the first time I won the championship was Toma.
Toma, okay.
God, I don't know just which year that was.
Now,
I have to look. I still got the trophy when they had some of the guys come to the racetrack there. I brought the trophy. there,
Oh, that's cool.
championship. But when I drove for Moose, I had a championship at Black River and
Okay.
Tacoma and Griffith Park wasn't until a little later. Then Griffith Park, and but altogether I had 23 track championships.
23. Okay. I was going to ask you. I knew it was quite a number, but I didn't know if it was quite 30, but I knew it was high up there. So.
Well, 23.
23.
Run hard, so got everything out of them that I could. But I had to be pretty careful because I had to work the next day. I didn't miss no work for racing. I would.
Marv, you want to pick your headphones up just a little bit? Sorry to cut you off. You want to pick your headphones up a little bit? Yeah. There you go. Perfect. Good to go now.
I would race and then work the next day, and I did all the truck driving too. So
Okay.
I always had a good hauler, so that made it easier. They got the Chevy garage at Black River give me a new truck to haul for a sponsor.
Okay.
So I had a new truck there, and
That always takes a little worry out of it, having
boy.
something good to haul it with.
Yeah, pulling it with a chain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a little bit of a promotion. Yeah. Speaking of working full time in racing, you always worked full time when you were throughout all those years of all that racing every single day. That's the one of the first really kind of big things I remember being told about you is, yep, Marv always worked through all those years. Because I believe my grandpa, he would take off during those summer months and concentrate on that.
Yeah. And Dick never worked. I guess he worked when we first started out. He worked at Freeway.
Okay.
Running a stamp press, but he didn't work there very long. So, and before that, he worked on the farm just across the field from my farm. So,
Okay.
well, started out working on a farm. So, anything's easier after that.
Yeah. When you're start off that young in life, having to work till 10 o'clock at night, and then you got more work waiting for you in the morning. I would certainly imagine. Now, when did you start racing for Moose Peterson?
I don't really know.
Okay. And that was probably a pretty prominent time too, or he was a very prominent car owner, I would say, in your racing. And how did that kind of come about? Because there really weren't. I was fascinated with that when my wife's when Ron Beyer had told me that he had a car owner back then. I was like, man, I really never heard of people owning people's cars back then. They were.
Well, Dick and I was working on a car, and we built a car, and he was driving for Moose. He was driving for Peterson.
I never knew that.
So I drove the car that we made.
Okay. That you and Dick made. Okay.
And with us two working on it, we got it to run better and better. And pretty soon, I was making more money than Dick was. And on the way home from Stratford one night, he says, Marv, we're going to have to do something about this. Why? He says, well, you're making more money than me, and I owned a car. Well, what are you going to say? He says, well, I'll talk to Moose. Maybe he'll let you drive the car. and I'll drive my own car.
Okay.
So sure enough, I talked to Moose, and Moose had a couple of drivers lined up for it, but it come to a head one night. We at Stratford, and then, well, what's it going to be, Marv, or I won't say the other guy's name, but he says, Marv's going to drive it. So
Okay.
I drove it that night, and I won the feature, and I wrecked it.
Won and wrecked all at the same time.
Yep.
What ended up happening that you wrecked it?
It had, there was granite on the racetrack was cracked, and there was granite on the racetrack, and he said, get up in there, you can't really get on the gas. He said, you win it. I says, I'm going to end up in the grandstand. He said, yeah, well, give you a damn, you won't end up in the grandstand. You win it. And I won it. But the car was finished going around, and I went into the grandstand abutment backwards and rolled one of the rear fenders up, and I thought, I don't know, it's the end of my job, but
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're probably thinking, well, I won, but I'm done, too.
yeah. No, he was happy we won. He was really happy we won. So I had a job. I drove all over then. Then he wanted to run all over. Then it was Madison.
Okay.
Got to go to Madison. God. I was okay with Black River and not Golden Sands.
Griffith Park? Okay.
Griffith Park, but now we're going to Madison. Jesus. Okay, then we went to Madison. Run Madison every time they ran in little quarter mile. And the Dells. They run every night. Run it every night. We had, there was no quick change in it. You would change transmissions. Chevrolet had, in 56 or so, their 3-speed had three different ratios.
Okay.
So if you had the 3 transmissions, it was a 131 was a long one. The 169 was for the Tomahawk. 154 was the one you'd run at the regular quarter mile.
Okay.
But you change that. And back then he had a guy running his wrecker, and they'd haul that thing on the wrecker with dollies underneath it. And when they get to the racetrack, it rained so much that they didn't change it before they got there. We get there early and change the transmission.
Sure, okay.
To get the right ratio.
Were you able to change it pretty quick doing it that way? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So change transmission a lot of times. A good transmission, they never broke.
Okay.
They weighed 56 pounds. I run in my late model. That's the only one I ever run.
Okay.
Well, I had more than one. A lot of them in case,
Yeah, right.
But that's the transmission. And we could run them in high gear then with the quick change.
Okay.
Otherwise, it was second gear that we were after.
Okay, right. Now, how did you? It's always neat to know this. How did you end up choosing your number?
That was Moose's number.
That was Moose's number. Okay.
His numbers were 19 and 91.
Okay.
Everett Fox had 19, and I had 91.
Cool.
He was good. He built a good car. He built one of his 57 Chevys on a Corvette frame. Got away with it a long time, but it went like on the rough tracks. Toma was rough and a short corners, and there's no way you could beat them that independent suspension. But then it broke so much, the rear drive shafts from changing angles or running at such an angle or whatever, but it broke the drive shafts or the universals that would break.
Was that pretty rare back then that someone was dabbling with the independent suspension?
Well, there was a lot of strange things.
I suppose.
Larry Barmel he sat in the middle of the car. He had a big heavy plate underneath it, but it worked. And then Jim Bach made one independent suspension.
Okay.
You tried a lot of stuff.
I imagine that back in those times you were trying whatever you could and get and whatever you could get your hands on, what was ever accessible to you.
Damn, that worked. So,
speaking of this stuff like that, is especially in those earlier beginning years, was there ever, can you recount something that you can think of that you tried that was just like, this is just as goofy as can be, but it ended up working out?
Oh yeah, a lot of things. A lot of things. Was wrecked up one night. I was wrecked up one night, run out of good tires. I had that Ford Torino, and there was a big wreck, and I got into it, but toward the back, so I wasn't. But I was out of tires. He poked holes in my tires, so I put the spare that we loaded with on the left rear. It was way bigger than the right. You know how that would.
Yeah.
That goddamn thing flew. I went from last place to first place, and I could just drive that thing around. Why? Don't ask me why. Because I tried stuff like that since then. It didn't work, but.
Yeah. And actually, on a similar topic to that, I don't know where I had heard this or when I heard it, but I don't know if you were the first or one of the first. Were you the first person that really figured out stagger?
Oh. That's probably was the start of it, yeah.
Okay. Someone had told me that a long time ago, and I always wanted to ask you, and I never did.
That was the start of it, so I don't know if I was the only one. If I knew it, Tom knew it, and Dick knew it, because
sure.
we talk to each other every day, and we're bragging to each other or something.
Right. Now, kind of going through, when did the first kind of really, when did you guys really start getting like fabricated chassis?
I suppose it was with Bimco.
Bimco, okay.
Jim Bach was one of the first ones to get it, and he run really good, and it was a good. He built a fine car. It's very hard to work on. Everything was built so tight, close. I had a big block in there, and it'd take you half a day to change the spark plugs because bars wrapped around front roll cage bars and things like that. But I bought a Bimco car. I went and bought it, told him I wanted it, and he was building it the way I wanted it. And I had the body, and he was getting it done, and then he says, you know, you can pick your car up. It started out just a rolling chassis, and then, do you want me to do this, and do you want me to do that? Yeah, what the hell, you know, it can't be that much. When I got the bill, I almost fainted, you know. It was way more than I was going to expend, twice of what I was going to expend on it. But anyway, it was a good car. I couldn't make it go around the corner. It plowed, pushed. So I ended up doing the thing backwards there too. The front steering, instead of give away all my secrets here. The dang thing wouldn't turn. So I know on the Ford front end had a lot of Ackerman.
Okay.
In fact, you could get it so it really, I thought, that can't hurt. It'll scrub the tire off. So I put reverse Ackerman in it. So when I got to the corner, that turned like that. That sucker turned. That left front dragged it around the corner.
Sure.
It was all wrong, but it worked. You know, I had fun with that for half the season, but after that, I'm not fixing no more of somebody else's projects. I'm building my own, and I built, I think, 7 of them after that, my own.
7 all of your own. Okay. Yeah. Did you have your own jig and everything, or how are you building them?
I would buy a cage built up from a cage built.
Okay.
And put it all together myself.
Okay, I gotcha.
So he had good benders, and he put all chromoly in it too. You know, so it was expensive. But I thought if I'm going to run 100 races a year, sooner or later it'll catch up to me. And it did.
Yeah.
Madison, you know, hit the wall full bore. I know I was going 130, you know, never touched the track and slammed into the wall. It held up and held together good enough. But I put the thing together, but he made the roll cage.
Okay.
So I didn't have no way to do that. I suppose Bach could have done it after that, but that's the way to work. And it was made the way I wanted. All the hookups and stuff was what I wanted, not what any of mine was. Mine was mine. There's none other ones like it. So the front end, the geometry of the front end and the back end, both the same, was always mine.
Okay.
So when I changed something, I knew it, you know.
Right.
So I didn't have to run up to the builder and have him try to fix it.
Yeah, it's always nice to be able to have that ability just to fix it yourself or make a new one yourself and rate your own shop and get it back going and not having to rely on someone else.
The first really fast car I had that I made, it had leaf springs in the back. You know, they're no good. But it worked. It worked. The tongue thing, the springs were arched like that, and then they went down on the end to get them lower. And I don't know if there was that much play that rear end could steer itself, but it worked. And then at Madison, the night it got crashed, I had fast time, trophy dash, heat, and I was just going in the first place in the feature.
Okay.
When TK Shear turned into my right rear and sent me into but I hit so hard that the rear end was in there crooked and the engine, everything was, it was toast.
It was a good hit, yeah.
Oh.
Now,
Then I had all plans for a new one. I had it half done, the chassis. I had it done 2 ways, I should say, for a year. Not run, but in my shop. And I had it, if this suspension changed on the rear end, what would happen if those arms were hooked backwards? So that rear end actually pulled the car. So I had it made up with rear arms and front arm, made up both ways. But then after I got smashed so bad in the Madison there, I hooked it up with front arms and never got to try it with hooking the rear end to the back.
okay.
Back of the car.
Yeah.
I mean, it's goofy, but try.
Yeah, try and try.
Try. You know what the hell? Some things that don't make sense.
There's certainly a lot of things guy stumbles on that this doesn't really make a lot of sense, but I'm going to try it, and it works a lot better than you think it should.
Yeah.
When you were talking about, eventually starting to have to travel down to Madison, kind of in general throughout your race career, how far did you travel out? My grandpa, I know he ended up going out to like Colorado, and did you ever end up doing anything like that, or going on to Florida, or did you stay pretty Midwestern?
Well, I went to Missouri a couple times, but that didn't work with my job. And I made money by going, but it really didn't make that much good. And I went to Canada. It was nice racing, good racing, but I could stay home and do my job and still race more than I wanted to.
Yeah.
I quit Madison after that wreck. I watched Dick and, of course, your grandpa. They'd use up a car a year. Dick, he went through 3 cars 1 year running Madison. Now, he didn't make expenses when you demolished your car.
Right.
So after that one, after doing it once, it was nice to run down there. And it was a long pull that I didn't have to make. I run good there. I won races. I made track records and stuff there, but it wasn't, it didn't fit in my bill.
Yeah.
I'd be better off to stay home and hold a garden.
Yeah, no, I mean, you are right. I mean, I've seen a lot of photos of, Trickle, my grandpa, and a lot of other people going through cars at that place, and some of those other big ones too, but Kakana.
I never liked Kakana. I run Kakana a lot. In fact, I quit racing one time, sold my car. I'm going to just work my job, go fishing. And by the time the news got around that next day, your dad and Jim Bach bought a car for me.
Bought it with the intent of you running it.
Not with me. Bought me and says, hey, Marv, why don't you pick up a 12-pack and come on out? Okay. Well, I got out there and they bought a car. And they wanted me to run it at Kaukauna in that heavy class. They had, I think they were 3,400 pounds or something. And that's what they were running over there for their. Well, how could I say no, And then a day later, they had Golden Sands sponsor it. I told this guy,
I just sold my car and decided to not do this.
Yeah. And that's not going to happen, Yeah. Well, it just is only one night a week, and Christ, they paid $750 to win.
No kidding.
So okay, I would do that. So one night a week, and I had a hauler and stuff, and so I went over there and I won a couple of their races, and we made money with it. But then all of a sudden, Golden Sands was sponsoring it. They want to see that car out there, but it was heavy. It was really heavy. You can unload some of the weight, but it was made out of water pipe. So I run it a little bit at the Sands, but I finished a year at Kaukauna.
What kind of car was that? 'Cause I think I remember hearing about that.
It was a 68 Ford, full size. It was a cow.
Okay.
It didn't run that bad. It had the Ford suspension. The Ford steering and stuff. You could always do something with that.
Okay.
To make it a little better than they all got. So it was a good. It was a good time. It was a good deal. Yeah, but that got me off the track when, every night. So.
The one event a photo I come across every once in a while of you that I always get a kick out of that I wanted to ask you about was, I think it's of you and Larry Weirs. It was when there was controversy of who won the Oktoberfest 200. It was you, but they had thought a car a lap down won it, right? Is that how that went?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so it was just a scoring mishap at the end there, or?
Well, it wasn't even at the end. It was like there was about 20 laps left to go, and I think there was a yellow with like 20 laps left to go, and gee, they left this car go in front of me. But that's not right, because what you had to do, you had to make a pit stop. You had to stop.
Okay.
Whether you put in gas, change the tire, or what, 200 lappers, so you had to stop. And when you went back on the track, you started in back.
Okay.
Period. You didn't start, you started in the back. And no cars passed me. I passed a lot of cars, and no car passed me the whole race. And I knew I was in the first place, I don't know, they had said that Billy Ois, that was who it was.
Okay.
He owned the track at Elko. He owned the Elko track.
Okay.
That he won, No way. Yeah, that really fired me up. Jeez, I was ready to fight.
Yeah, I'd imagine a big race like that.
Fight, but I was.
Was it a relatively quickly solved issue, or did it take a little figuring out?
No, well, Larry agreed with me.
Okay.
Maybe it was because of how I told him.
You were very convincing.
Yeah. Yeah, very convincing. But, and then I guess they must have realized it. So I know your grandpa did it 2 years before that. He stopped, started it in the back, and he didn't really have to race, he just kept up his time and ended up winning the race. I said, that's the secret.
Okay.
Write this down. That's the secret. Get your pit stop in. So anytime, if any flag, if it's after, I figure I had that big block. She was a gas. She'd eat a lot of gas.
Okay.
I said, if it's anywhere 40 laps or around 40 laps, I'm stopping. So I did. There was no reason for me to stop. I just put my stop in and went in and told the guys a joke and went to the back. Put in gas. We put in gas, but that was the ticket. So
throughout, so the one thing I think about is, the group of you guys that grew up together and were so close, and also all happened to be front runners and fierce competition. How did you guys stay friends through all that? And did you guys ever have run-ins? I know my grandpa and Dick had a couple incidents where Dick ended up wrecking them. I don't know if that might have been at Madison and
West Salem.
Okay. Yeah.
That same night, I'll tell you a little bit about this. They were going to it, they took off, the race started, and they were going through the cars like pretty soon, big wreck, and Dick was over the wall, and Grandpa's car was sitting on top of the wall, and I stopped. There was, red flag, so I stopped there, and it was going to be a while, so I walked across the track with Tom, and Tom says, "Oh, crazy, that was quite a wreck. Look at there, he said, there's somebody's fuel cell." I recognized the fuel cell because Tom put it in with threaded rod, had wound around that thing and up through the angle there.
Oh, no kidding.
I says, "Tom, that's your fuel cell."
Hey, look at that over there.
That was funny.
Oh.
But both cars were wrecked, Tom was missing his fuel cell, and plus a lot of stuff bent up after riding that wall.
Yeah, especially there.
Yeah. Well, when you race that many times, a lot of crazy stuff happens. I had, we were running those big balloonies, Indy cars, tires.
Okay, yep.
1700s. It was big wide.
Like Firestones?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we had coming out of number 4 there, and here was Richie Summers. He was sliding on his roof. Bach was sliding on his side, and I missed. I went way down to the inside, and I missed. But I had to jam on the brake because there was a car there. I jammed on the brakes, and that big old hot 17-inch tire on the right front, it turned that car right around and right underneath the flag man. Pow! Cut my radiator right in half.
No kidding.
But why that tire had so much bite that, I was along for the ride. We spent a lot of money on tires by buying them, they were like $160 a piece.
Wow, that's quite a bit back then.
Yeah. Yep.
And how long were those tires lasting, you guys?
I don't know if you always get hole punched in them because they hung way outside the car, and
Oh, right, yeah.
it was a real hazard. But
What made them transition to running those?
there was no law.
Oh,
There
yeah.
was
At
no
that point, you
rule.
guys could just run whatever you could get your hands on. Okay.
And we were looking for a way to get it, but it turned out very, very expensive.
Yeah.
That year I spent $11,000 on tires, just tires that year, and I had 106 race dates that I run that year. So
106. Wow.
I mean, it sounds like a story. It didn't. It can't happen, but that's the way it was.
Yeah. Was that 70s or 80s time frame when you guys were ran those tires?
70s.
70s. Yeah. Wow. At $160 a tire. I got mad a couple of years ago when I was paying $160 a tire.
Were that the regular track tires that you guys were?
Yeah, the Hoosiers. Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, I think they're 190s now.
And then they're 190.
Yeah, I think 190, 195.
And then they're soft rubber and they don't last.
Yep.
That can't happen. The best tire, one of the best tires we had was a hard old tire. I think it started out as an implement tire.
Okay, interesting.
And we were running when they were like $70 a piece. But some of the guys got scared of one blowing out at West Salem or something, and we had to get off them. But man, that was cheap. And the goddamn things would repeat to what they were, which wasn't really good, but it wasn't really bad.
You're right. One of the things I ended up coming across on you, and actually I hadn't even really known it, you had the nickname Ridge Runner.
Yeah.
How did you get that?
Well, Don Reuter was the announcer. And when I drove for Moose, I would ride to the races with the techs,
Okay.
the announcer and the flag man, and I'd ride with them guys, and they had all kinds of names for me. I'd always give them shit because I was making more money than they were, and they'd give me crap. And I'd go, well, how much you make tonight, Don? For an ouncer, $75, and the other guy, what'd you make? 200 and something it would be.
Yeah.
And then it was money bags. Then they call me money bags. Ridge Runner was one night at Black River. The cars was getting together, and there's just no way to pass unless you took three-way, the third groove.
Okay.
And I took the third groove with one wheel hanging off the racetrack on the top side and in places, and I won the race, and he gave me the Ridge Runner name.
Okay. Yeah, I had came across that recently when going through some things, and I had never really heard that before. It's always Marvelous Marv to me, but I had never heard Ridge Runner. But actually, that brings us up when Kirby Kurth just came and did a show with me, and he was actually telling me that before he started racing, the thing that he always remembered about you was he goes, Marv was always so good at passing people 3 wide at Golden Sands. And then he went on to talk about how I think he was trying to tell Mike Miller how he needed to pass at Golden Sands, and he wouldn't listen to him. But that was the one thing Kirby had said that he always remembered about you is how you could pass 3 wide there.
Yeah.
Was it uncommon and you were just able to make it work?
Well, when the races started out, there wasn't really that many fast cars, and it started out with two in the front. I said whether I won't mention no names, but
Yeah.
it started out slow and it's easy. Just sit back there, round. Got to do something.
Yeah.
Whoa. And away we go. Well, hell, the first time I done that, I damn near passed the whole field in a lap. And the second time I did it, I don't know, it was a couple of laps. I went like this and then was able, but nobody would go up there because there was marbles and stuff up there.
Yeah.
But it was just better than sitting in the back. Can't go. Here you got 500 horsepower and you can't use it.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So I did it. So that was pretty tricky. There's a lot of these old guys around that. Remember that time at Golden Sands, you run 3 wide? I remember it, but it was no big thing. The other cars were so much slower. So.
Yeah, no one likes to sit in the back and just ride around and wait for things to sort out. Well, now times, depending on if it's the track or series, you might, not that I'm advocating it for it by any means, but sometimes you don't even have the option of going. Well, you can't go 3 wide to the inside, but nowadays it's some of those tracks, and people in the field is fairly close usually, and trying to go 3 wide is pretty challenging thing.
No.
Yeah.
No, that won't happen. Not nowadays. No. This there's a lot of pushing and going up the inside, and we never did that. Never, ever. Once in a mile, when you get somebody from out of town from Kakana or somewhere, if there were slow cars in the front, they still try to go underneath them. So.
You're saying you guys raced a little differently than they do in the lower divisions of NASCAR nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, you turn on the TV and you watch people going for wins, wrecking the leader, and then they wreck themselves, and
yeah,
it's
top 6 cars out.
Yep.
That happened a while back.
Yeah, in the last couple laps, and yeah.
Yeah, I was surprised how the race turned out. Sunday, they actually raced to the end of the race.
Yeah, I didn't catch that one. I didn't tune in. Now, one thing I, thinking back to when you guys were racing, still all together, you'd always hear of, whether it was you or Dick or Deachin's, going on a long streak of winning, whether it was at one particular track or just over the course of a couple days, and then it'd be as for instance it'd be Dick would go on a win streak, and then you would go on a win streak, and then Dick would go on a win streak. In between those streaks of winning, when you were kind of coming in and out of those streaks, what were you, because I know racing at those times was evolving so much. Was it just small things that you guys were finding to put yourself back on those winning streaks, or are you guys figuring out some big stuff?
It was like, I worked all the time, didn't get the chance to work on the car every day. It would be just setup, simple setup. That then at the last few years, I just had the kids do it. Well, since they were Terry was about 11, but he'd set the caster and the camber and check the toe in and the split on the tires that we had for the night, and the car was ready to go when I got home. Got my supper here, and out the door I'd go. So it was North La Crosse. That was a old Highway 16, you know, that was a good 2.5 hours to get there. And if I get out of work at 5, I could just buzz home, and that thing better be ready so I can go to get there on time. Get home. And then the payoff was terrible there. It was a good payoff, but way late. Couldn't leave without my money. You know?
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I needed it to get to the next one.
Yeah.
Now, go ahead.
Go ahead.
The thing I was going to ask is, I know you talked about, building a lot of your own cars. Did you build your own motors throughout, your career too, or did you kind of look on an engine builder at one point?
I guess all in all, I only had one built motor.
Okay.
Bud Stevens bought me a motor.
Okay.
But before that, when we were driving Fords, Dick and I, we'd have them apart every day, once a week or something. Checking the rings. Well, Jesus, look at this one. Look at the gap in there. That's a good ring. Put that on this pile when we need it, because most of them are like this,
Okay.
And then we had so much engine problems that we had them in and out of there a lot of times. The last time we got the Ford motor to run was, I kept telling Dick, it was side rod clearance. Can't be, but it is. So we was going to give her more side rod clearance. He had the grinder, body grinder, and I had the calipers, and I would measure. Well, you got to take a little off here, and then a little off there. And the engine that lasted the longest never did blow up. I sold a car with that engine, but had no more problems with it. We were putting the engine together in Dick's front yard when Bach stopped by. What are you guys doing? Well, we're putting this engine together for that car to go to the Dells. You ain't gonna make it. We were still checking the rings for the pistons. We went to the Dells that night. I won that night too. So.
Didn't think you were gonna make it and showed up and won anyways.
Yeah. It was in that engine was called it Old Smoky, I built a new one. Got all the parts from Ford. All those expensive valves and push rods and roller rockers, and I had a ton of money in the goddamn thing. And it got to the Minnesota Fair and set a good time and started out in the big race. And 15 laps, I was quarter of a lap ahead and blew it up, scattered all over the racetrack. Brand new stuff. That hurt.
Yeah, that'll make a guy sick in a hurry.
My winnings for the year. I mean, it took me down. I had nothing left for the year. No more Fords for me. And Dick, he tried it, a few times yet.
I know there was a stint with him. Was he going through a lot of prototype motors? Were those the Fords that he was going through a lot of?
No. Those were Chevys.
Those are Chevys that he was going through?
Those were Chevys. But
okay.
A lot of them that he went through, he just abused. They were giving him motors. I seen him at Wausau oil, one had a hole in his radiator, and he patched it up with some kind of gum patch he put on there, and Dick, it's not going to hold. Temperature's down. With no liquid, no fluid in the goddamn thing. I did check, it didn't have the temperature. And when he come in from the race, the corker on the valve covers was burning. Got that hot. Brand new motor out of Milwaukee. Just ruined it. I mean,
Yeah, that's hot.
Run it until it was die. Yeah, mine was done. Moose bought the big blocks. He bought one big block. It was $1,495 for the dealer. I said, if you buy me one, I'll buy one. Then we got two of them because he was furnishing me with a truck.
Okay.
Okay, a truck and a motor. So I run his motor all season, never done nothing to it. Put the money in the bank.
Yep.
And then the next year, that motor I took to Missouri and made a record down there at the fair and
Okay.
won some money. And Tom and Dick went to Odessa, and I went to Springfield because the guy gave me money to race there. And Dick and Tom raced Missouri, and the guy didn't pay. And it rained where I was, but the guy paid me $500 for coming down. So I made out better
than they did.
But still, we all trucked down to Missouri.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that now. I think I got more sense now. Maybe not. So, it was a long ways. Bach talked me into going there. He says, I don't know why you don't go. It's just across the border from Indiana or something like that, you know. It's just across the border, all right. Oklahoma.
Yeah, right. Just across the border.
Yeah. It was a good place to go. Believe it or not, a couple of years ago at West Salem, the guy says, I remember you. He says, I'm from Missouri. I remember you racing there. No, that's
No kidding.
That's a lot of years ago, and
yeah,
haven't raced for 30 years, and still remembers the thing coming down there and running.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, you betcha.
Yeah, that was me. I was there.
Yeah. Well, that's a little pick me up.
Yeah, it's always neat when you get those interactions from a fan that you're that brings up something that you're completely not expecting whatsoever, and you barely remember yourself.
All in all, it was hard work. When I quit, what made me really quit was West Salem, fall of the year, cold, about 300 people in the stand. I'm in the back of 17 cars. Cold. what the hell am I doing here? I could be home resting. I could be home.
Well, what was your last year of racing?
82.
82. Okay.
Oktoberfest of 82. I had by far the fastest car there. I mean, it was almost a half a second faster than second place car on their timer.
Okay.
So it was fast. The race started out in about 70 laps or so. The engines were popping, and here it got screwed up in the distributor. And I couldn't find what was wrong. I thought it sounded like there was water or something in the fuel.
Okay.
And we're looking at that. We got it done in time to run out on a racetrack, and they were going already, so I parked it. I didn't finish the race, but I set a track record that day, and was really happy the way the car was. So.
Was that your actual last race then? Was that one? Okay.
Oh, no, I take that back. About 3 years, I didn't go to the races.
Okay.
I couldn't go. I went to a snowmobile race up at Wausau and damn near bought a snowmobile. What do you think,
Yeah, go back to a car before you go to a snowmobile.
Well, I wanted to. So I come to my senses before I left. And then I was asked if I would drive this car. No. And I drove it, the car that Terry had for his owners there, for muscular dystrophy.
Okay.
If I would do one shot at each racetrack for muscular dystrophy, and I did. So.
Okay, cool.
So that was good. That was a lot of fun. And then, after the race, I took my helmet and I went up through the crowd. And geez, I got a lot of hugs and kisses, and some of them didn't even fight me.
That is cool though. When did Terry start racing?
Way back. He had I think his first car was a Gremlin. Him and the neighbor kid built the Gremlin, and they run that and figured out that Terry was a way better driver than he was, and Terry was going to drive it. Then he had different cars along the way. He brought my car back after, I think it set 2-3 years, and he raced it at Wausau.
Okay.
He got fast time and almost won the feature. So.
Did he start racing after you decided to be done, or did you guys overlap a little bit?
No. Oh, yeah, he raced.
Okay.
He raced a little bit all the time. He was a truck champ for 2 years, state. So he won a lot of truck races.
I couldn't remember when he had started racing. I didn't know if you and him had ever gotten the chance to race together actually or not.
No.
No, okay.
I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
Were you excited to have a kid race too, or did you encourage it or?
No, I didn't encourage it.
No.
I didn't encourage it.
You knew all the work and everything else that came along with it.
There's too many heartaches in racing.
Yeah, that there is.
There's a lot. there's the good times, and there's really good times. It's really nice. And a driver is. I used to go to. I hated Kakana. I used to go to Kakana. Are you going to Kakana? Are you going to? So many people wanted to see you go. I would go. And I didn't like it the whole time I was there, and but it was. I didn't like that part. So they expected you, what they expect out of you. So.
Yeah, I've encountered that in my times where I've been asked a lot. Well, hey, how come we don't ever see you at this race? And you're going to come to this one, and it was either A, because I didn't care to do that race, or B, I couldn't afford to do it. And but yeah, so I've kind of ran into that expectation. It took me a little bit to kind of get over that and just kind of be okay with it. But yeah, I know what you mean there.
Why don't you run Madison anymore? Well, you run good down in Madison. How come you don't run to Madison? It's too goddamn far, and I broke all my bones down there.
Yeah.
It costs too much money. So I don't want to work to pay for my car if racing can't pay for my car. All the motors was I had those 2 big blocks from Moose. Everything else we made in these 9-to-1 motors. Mike Miller and Dick and I think your grandpa, and we were all together on making them, and they worked good and they were cheap. That was very good. But built them ourselves. The big blocks, I built the big block. With all the good stuff, with the good rods and the steel crank, and it's 481 cubes. And that thing was dynamite. It lasted at Kakana for one race. I made a track record and won the dash for cash. The thing it just had so much power. It was unreal. I know it had more than 100 horse more than my regular ones did. And it was a different firing order, different headers. It fired. I don't remember how it was anymore, but it was all different. But
sure.
The thing worked. And then my friend from Minnesota put it together, and he wanted to put a light harmonic balancer on it. I said, you can't do that. Not on the 454, because they're balanced with the flywheel and the harmonic balancer. Well, he got a light aluminum. It wasn't going to help. Light aluminum balancer. And then he didn't tighten it. So when he didn't tighten it, the gear was running on just that key.
Okay.
And finally it sheared the key off. And then the valve slowed down. You know what that does? They were Junior Johnson heads. They were Gorilla rods, Junior Johnson heads. All #1 stuff. And it pulled the studs right out of the top of the aluminum head. It busted everything,
Okay.
junked it.
Wow. Yeah.
So never got her on it. So just that one day. Oh, I should have finished putting it all together because it was a gear drive, not a chain drive. So
Okay.
it was good stuff.
Yeah. Now through the times, through, the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, and I kind of think about racing, as it is today. What do you think made racing so strong and popular back in those times?
One thing it was like the Dells, just Dells, for instance. There was a lot of nights there was 100 cars. There was, for good cars, it was probably 12, 15 good cars. You had Shearer and Watson, and
Mm-hmm.
we get the guys from Michigan, and Dick and Tom and I and Bach, and I mean it was good. It was the best of the best of the best. It made a lot of difference. If there's only, racing went out once before when there got to be seven, I should say, like Wausau had it, 7 cars in the feature. That ain't a race.
No, yeah, it's tough thing to watch.
So when there was this many, when we'd have those specials, like one track each week would change, and those Tuesday night specials were working because they had the hot dogs from all week racing, and there was a lot of people. Put on a good show.
Now down at the Dells, you collected a handful of championships down there, right?
10.
10 of them. Wow. Okay, I didn't know it was that many. I knew it was a fair amount. Okay, 10 championships at the Dells. Was that? I'm gonna guess. Was that your favorite track?
No.
But you just ran really good there, though.
Yeah.
What was your favorite track?
Wausau.
Really? Okay.
It was fun running Wausau. It was fun running Wausau. So the favorite track to race on would have been the Minnesota Fair track because you had a lot of time to do anything,
Yeah, that was a fairly large track, right?
Yeah. And easy track to run. Wasn't hard on the brakes. It wasn't hard on, like Kakana is the engine. I mean, you turn the engine right up. In order to have any power coming out of the corner, you got to turn the wick up. By the time you get to the end of the straightaway, you're over revving it. It's hard on it. It's hard on it.
Hard on equipment even back then.
Wasting my motor here.
Yeah, I really like Kakana. I've had my bad times there, but for some reason I think probably it's one of the tracks I had never raced there, and I went there my first time, and I think I either finished like 6th or 5th or something like that. Ran really good, and I think I went back and ran about the same, and then things kind of went south on all my other times heading there after that. But
Bagged up.
yeah, we ended up in the wall a couple times. But
Yeah.
I still for some reason always liked it. Probably because it was a half mile. It's fast.
Madison wasn't a real bad track either, actually. But sure had a lot of knotheads there.
Yeah, when you're at a big fast track, having to race around people that, not 100% sure what's going to happen with, that's not the place to be with them.
When I raced down there, a lot of my racing down there was like 4 fast cars, and they put 15 cars in a race. You were dodging cars because at the end of the straightaway, you were running 20 miles an hour faster than some of the guys. So
Yeah, it's quite the hazard to head.
it wasn't like this. It was like this.
Yeah, a little bit of a speed difference.
So, and they got it down to where there wasn't a lot. So, good night for me to rest. Well, there's a lot of good. Elko was a fun racetrack, and they done redid Elko one time, and it was they had put crushed glass in the track.
Interesting.
The blacktop. And you'd have a hard time holding your head up because you could just run in the corner like that.
Oh, really?
and
So
stomp on it.
so that crushed glass really made it hook on.
Bite, yeah. We were racing up there, and I won the race, but Mike Miller was leading the race. He was way out ahead, and we were going, and pretty soon he just slowed up. And I passed him. I said, "What the hell? What happened?" He says, I could not hold my head up anymore. And some of us had bungee cords.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was a pretty good racetrack. I guess the Minnesota Fair one was the best. Golden Sands was all right. It sure is different. I mean, everybody just can't come there and run. They got to have been around there a couple times.
Yeah, it's definitely, it looks like a simple track, but yeah, there's some unique things that you got to figure out to make yourself get around there.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite win across all the races at all? That one that it sticks out? It's like, man, that one was really cool to win.
Probably would be West Salem. They had Mark Martin and of a couple of the Michigan cars there. They had Mark Martin was one of them there, and I won the race.
Okay.
And that's pretty special to me.
Yeah.
Because that was a hot dog at a hot dog. Oh, Shear was there. There was a few of them. And I guess I would say that one.
Okay.
Otherwise, there was so many, and nothing in between. Well, the first one with my flathead, my first feature with the flatheads, I suppose that'd have to be the best one.
Yeah, those first ones are always have their reasons for being special. So, what? Now you ended up, you decided to kind of back away and step away from racing, much earlier than what my grandpa did and what Dick did. Was that to just, you kind of got to the point when you've accomplished, you got all those wins and 23 championships, did you kind of just get to the point where, hey, you know what, I've had my fun, it's time to go hang out with family and do the other things I love to do?
Yeah. I'm going. I'm going to every church picnic there is. I'm going to the class reunion, church picnic, any other wedding or anything. I'm going to go to them all.
Yeah.
So many years it was 25 years. That's a lot to cut out of your life.
Yeah, when you really look at it, it's a quarter of a century. Quarter of a century, yeah. Yeah, and actually this is year 25 for my racing career, and yeah, I look at that and I'm like, man, it and of course I haven't had 100 and some races in a single season, but I think about the times in my life, probably the most amount of races I've ever really done is maybe 23 or 24 races in a year, something like that. And I think about the time and the commitment and all the things you miss to do that, but to do 100 and some in a year is, yeah, you're not doing a whole lot else, but
No. At night I sit there cold in my car and looking at the whole line of cars and nobody on the hill. I'm cold. What the hell are you doing? I don't have.
But your whole life you'd really always been into hunting and fishing, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And I did a lot of fishing after that and hunting. I don't know. Hunting doesn't really do that much for me anymore. Of course, I got the farm that I got deer and turkeys, and it's a fun place now where I had my worst times.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, be able to come back there and just have fun at that place now.
I got a every year I put in apple trees and stuff. I got an apple orchard out there. The deer come in all the time. So.
Do you have a certain type of fish that's your favorite to go for? You can go for them all.
Fin fish, any kind, anything.
Yeah, whatever's biting that day, right? Now, the one thing I really wanted to talk about and touch on, and it's probably something I really never got a chance to really, I never really talked about it a lot with my grandpa, but the thing that I have talked with other people a little bit about that I thought was so special, all the work that went into the Trickle Memorial. I still couldn't believe that, when you guys kind of set out to put all that together and do that idea, I thought it was going to be, hey, you guys are going to do some fundraisers. This money's going to come together. This contractor's going to come in. These people are going to come in, pour the concrete, put up all the brick and do everything. And then all of a sudden I'm coming down to my race shop on the Saturday mornings and there's my grandpa drilling holes and coming up with ideas for fixtures and how you guys are going to put stuff together, and you guys are spending all that time out there in the hot and the rain and the cold, and you guys put a lot of effort into that.
Well, I'll tell you one about when we started. Tom got the guy with the excavator to come and dig in the hole. Well, geez, that's a pretty big hole we made out there in the park. And it's going. They do it. And we were working at it, and I said, you guys are crazy. This won't happen. I said, you realize the youngest guy down here in the bottom in this red clay ditch is over 70 years old, the youngest one. I says, we're not gonna do it. We're not gonna do it. Tom was so persistent, he almost got mad at me for doing
It was a
that.
big task. It was a big task.
Yeah, that was, we're gonna start something here, and we're not gonna be able. We're not gonna be able to come up with them. When we first started out, we were looking for some kind of stone. We went to the tombstone guy over there.
Okay.
And we were going to get a stone. It didn't look like a gravestone. Something that we can have put out there. That's the way it started out.
Just a stone. Just a nice memorial stone.
To put in the park.
Yep.
And everything, pretty soon, the space that we got our space moved a couple times. In the last time, they said, well, you can make it there, it's right on. It was in July. There was 5 inches of water right where Trickle Stone is right now. There was 5 inches of water there. It was like this. Drainage was so poor, it would just hold everything.
Yeah, a lot of clay out there.
That red clay, I got a big washer. I washed Stu's tractor off that I can still show you it on my sand over there. It's still red clay. It just don't go away.
No.
Sticky red shit. But anyway, we just kept on, and Tom was so persistent that, and I'd come over, and he'd be working on the computer there, getting this together or that together. And the people were so good. Nobody said no. Nobody said no. We had so many race fans, over the years that nobody would say no. Yeah, we can do that, we'll do this, we'll do that. Tom and I went to the couple of companies up at Wausau, that big, by the airport there. He asked to get the frame anodized, And the big boss says, yeah, we can do it. Well, we wanted to get a price. And I forget what he says. It was like $100 or $70. No. We says, no, we want the whole frame anodized. And he says, yeah. But he says, we got fans here too.
Mm-hmm.
So they did it for, I think it was $70 or something like that.
That's awesome.
All those pieces and done that. Like I said, anybody we talked to, which made it much easier. It wasn't an easy thing, but it still was much easier. Yet pretty soon there was more people believing in it than Tom and me.
Yeah, I mean just the events alone that were put on out there to raise money, and the people that would come out and and have came out over the years and have stopped by to visit it. I mean, yeah, it's an awesome thing.
Yeah,
it's an awesome thing.
Yeah, we had a lot of fans from West Salem, or that part of the country, La Crosse and over that way. Actually, I shouldn't say more of them because everybody says, yeah, sure. Anything we needed, it went.
No, it turned out beautiful, and it I don't know, there's nothing really like it, out there, and it's definitely something for short track fans to love forever.
we got a better memorial than Earnhardt has got.
I haven't seen what Earnhardt has, but I believe it. You guys put together something fantastic. Fantastic.
A lot of people stop there. There's a lot of people stop there. I go to the farm out there once a week, or more than that, more than once a week. Like right about now, I go there every day, fixing something or aligning something. I rent the house out there, so. And I stop at the memorial and when there's somebody there, and
Okay.
they're happy to hear and see and what's there, and so we got a little box next to it there that says, to keep the memorial up, where you can put a few coins in there.
Okay, that's good. I didn't know that. So if there's anyone out there listening and you stop out at the Dick Trickle Memorial, there's a box out there where you can contribute so you can keep making sure that the place stays nice and beautiful.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, I did not know that you guys had that out there, so that's good.
So.
Well, tell you what, Marv, I appreciate all the stories. I know my grandpa really cherished his friendship with you and all the time and the years together, and my grandma still does today as well. And my family has always had such wonderful things to say about you, and you've given so much to racing, and whether it's history and everything. I really appreciate the opportunity for you to come here and and share so many of those stories with me.
Most of it is true.
Well, I believed every word of it.
Okay, that's good. That's one down.
But so really for what you got going on, sounds like you've just been loving doing the fishing and hanging out at the farm.
Yeah.
That's good.
So, I got a shop, but I'm not in my shop every day. I'm not making something every day, but
Still tinkering every once in a while?
yeah.
Yeah.
Not on cars. Not on cars. I went and bought a new truck, and I haven't hardly seen it since. It's back at the dealership. The transmission quit.
Okay.
So that's why I got that old one that I'm driving there. They give me one to drive. That's why I'm almost late here, because they gave me a truck and then they sold that truck, and so they were picking up the one I had and leaving me another one. And he got there at 3 o'clock. So.
Yeah, I saw it had the year sticker up on the windshield. I'm like, oh, Marv must just got back from buying a new truck and headed right here.
Yeah. Not buying, they just give it to me to use. Mind, I got a new truck. I hope the memorial keeps up. Gary Erickson takes care of it, care of the grass and stuff around it, and what it needs in it, the changing in that between Don Lee, Stuke, and the guys there. Everything gets changed when you do. I don't do no physical labor on nothing. I can't. But still thinking. When we first started that thing, we had to get some money. We had to get a lot of money.
Yeah.
We were getting prices on a memorial, they're talking about 300,000, and I don't even know how big them numbers are, but 300,000 that we got to pay. And then the statue, you know, was going to be 60,000 and 65,000 on top of that. Well, that's too much money. So we started doing it. That was for a company to do it.
Okay.
And then we just went on our own, you know. So.
Yeah, it's you know, and I think the thing that I think about that is, there's not a lot of people that would, take on such a task for a friend, and I think that, we talked about a little while ago was, that you guys were such fierce competition on a racetrack and we're all competitive, but you had the little mix-ins, but you guys always stayed friends, and then even all those years later, and kind of, after Dick was no longer here, you guys all came together and put that huge effort into making that memorial happen. It's pretty cool to do for a friend. There ain't a lot of people that would do that.
It was the thing to do. It was the thing to do. Tom should be recognized as very well, too. He did most of the figuring on the thing, and he knew a lot of people for a lot of things. For the iron, and always somebody knew something. Gary had the concrete workers, and always somebody who would know. So, I'll call so-and-so. Nobody would say no. So we'll have a celebration there again.
Yeah, I see there's going to be another one. That's cool.
So it's going to be a little bit different. It's for a good time. So we don't have to raise no more money. We had to come up with a lot of money, and I says, well, I know some folks over where I live there, they got a new Harley Davidson, and they had tickets for that. And they had enough tickets for $20,000, and they paid for this Harley and gave it away. God damn, why don't we get a Ford Mustang? Oh, that's a good idea, everybody. Yeah, that's a good idea. So we had the Martin Ford Mustang we give away. Well, we had tickets for that, and the tickets weren't going real fast because we was only selling them here. We got
Oh, sure.
a few more on the wagon. And when we got right down to Oktoberfest, we didn't think we had enough money to half pay for the thing. Of course, we didn't know how much money they had at all these places that were selling.
Oh, yeah, that's right, because they're getting sold in a couple different places, yeah.
Tom and Dee Dee and Audrey and I, we stood by the gate where you go into Oktoberfest, and we couldn't take the $100 bills fast enough and writing down the names,
Yeah.
on the tickets and rolling the tickets up and putting them in this vial. But we could not keep up. I say all the people from La Crosse and that area, well, they were from all over. And come to find out, on that day, we found out that we had gone over what the Mustang cost, which was $43,000.
Okay.
We went over by over $20,000.
Wow.
So it turned out to be a good.
Turned out to be a good plan.
Yeah, and we were thinking we were losing all of our T-shirt money. You know, we were selling T-shirts for $10 and keeping $3, and
Mm-hmm.
we thought we're sunk. All that money is going to be gone. But as it come out, we made over 20,000 on it.
That's cool.
That was a good send off.
Yeah, that it was.
Everybody come through.
Yeah, that they sure did. Sure did.
I don't know. You know my life now.
Yeah, no, like I said, I appreciate you sharing all those stories, and just incredible. You know, like I said, I did not know you had 23 championships. 10 of them came from the Dells. That's you've accomplished a lot, and in a shortened time span in comparison to some of the other guys that kept on going, and especially while doing a full-time job all at the same time, and absolutely incredible for sure. But so I appreciate you sharing all those stories.
Certainly welcome.
Yeah, no, I appreciate making the drive out here and taking the time to do this, and it's been a blessing to have you come out here and share all that stuff with me, and definitely appreciate it. It's been a great time.
So what is it? What does it go on, or what is it?
So all the shows have been put on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and then various other kind of podcast platforms. So I'll make sure you get a link on you. I'll make sure Kale sends you a link. So okay. That's why thanks to Kale for reaching out to Terry and then them guys getting a hold of you. So I originally reached out to Kale and I said, hey, do you think your grandpa would be interested in doing this? And he's like, I'd love to see my grandpa come and tell some stories. So I appreciate those guys reaching out to you and doing that for me. Good. So this has been a wonderful time, and
good.
I'm sure everyone else is gonna love and appreciate all the stories too. And thank you, Marv. Thank you for listening in on another episode of Speed and Grease. And if it was your first episode, I really appreciate you checking us out, checking out Speed and Grease, seeing what we're all about, listening to our amazing guests and their fantastic stories. And if you like the show, if you got some laughs out of it, even if you didn't like the show, thank you for joining us, taking that time. If you're not, wherever you like to listen in, check out, cool things that we're posting, whether it's on Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever, Amazon Music. Give us a like, follow us, leave a comment, a rating. Really appreciate it. Really helps the show get noticed, and helps spread the word and keep these stories out there. And the more people that can hear these great stories, the better. Spreading as Jerry Guiley would say, spreading the gospel of racing, and just want to keep it moving. So thank you for listening.